Welcome to the Empowered Podcast, Episode 12. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of the Empowered Podcast. I'm your host, Ellery Wells, and this is the podcast designed to help you develop, grow, and overcome the challenges that you are facing. In today's episode, I wanted to share with you a conversation that I had with the one and only podcast answer man, Cliff Ravenscraft. This is one of the very first in-person interviews that I have ever done. In the last episode, you heard the conversation that I had with Amy Porterfield, and it was actually at the exact same conference that I was able to catch up with Cliff. It's a live interview, and right towards the end, one of the session gets out, and, it gets in the way just a little bit, but Cliff tells us the journey of how he went from making $11,000 just a few years ago to becoming the go-to guy for anyone serious about starting a podcast. Without further delay, this is the chat that I had with the one and only Cliff Ravenscraft. I'm here today with Cliff Ravenscraft of the podcast answerman.com. How you doing, Cliff?
I've never been better. It gets better every single day.
Absolutely. We're actually here at the Platform Conference in Dallas, and I had the opportunity to snag Cliff for a couple minutes and couldn't help but ask him about his journey towards success and get his thoughts. So, Cliff, if you would, what kind of challenges did you face going from the very beginning to becoming the podcast answer man?
Absolutely. Well, one of the things is, for me, I used to be an insurance agent, and I was extremely well paid as an insurance agent. In fact, I worked in a family-run insurance agency that had been in the family since 1927.
Wow.
I'd been working with by the way, it's owned by my mom and dad. I'd been working with them for 11 years before I started podcasting as a hobby, and made plenty of money, extremely successful in that career. And if I would not have left, today I'd be making $500,000 a year,
wow,
guaranteed.
Wow.
So the thing is, though, in January 2008, I left that career to pursue podcasting full time, where there was nobody out there that was making a living from podcasting. There was no such thing as a business model that you could follow. And not only that, I didn't even know what a business model was. I heard people talking about business plans and all these other things. I had no formal training whatsoever. So the only thing I had going for me is that I knew that this is what I wanted to do with my life. I wanted to, on a daily basis, create content that would make a difference in people's lives. And I recognized, the only thing I knew is that after doing this for 2 years as a hobby, people were interested in paying me to help them learn how to do what I was doing. And so I figured, hey, let's give this a shot. I think that, I could create content. Maybe I can monetize it this way, a little monetization that way, and all this stuff. And the majority of my income will hopefully be made up by people who will pay me to teach them how to podcast.
So when you were making that transition from insurance to podcasting, what obstacles came up that you had to go over or around or possibly even through?
Well, the first one was lack of income. I went my first year, I still have the IRS tax return to prove it. My income for 2011, personal income, was $11,000.
In 2011?
Or, I'm sorry, 2008.
Okay,
2008 was $11,000. That was it for the year. And that's not net income, that was gross. Although I will tell you this, my gross was my net because they didn't take any taxes, because I was below the poverty line that year.
Oh.
So that was one challenge that I had. The biggest challenge that led to that, though, was the problem that I had a hard time getting people to hire me. And I didn't have a hard time getting noticed. I was very bold, and I had a story, and people were excited to see what I was doing. But what happened was people would say, "Hey, Cliff, I've heard about you. I've been referred to you. Can we get on the phone for 30 minutes? And I just want to get a good feel of who you are, what you have to offer, and see if you're the right person that I should be working with to start a podcast. And so I'm like, I'm desperate for clients. Heck yeah, I'll give you a free 30-minute consultation. Well, the problem is in 30 minutes, I was able to give them everything they needed. I was able to deliver to them what it would have taken them 6 to 18 months on their own to figure out. In 30 minutes, I gave that to them. And at the end of that, and sometimes I would go for an hour. And if I really enjoyed talking with the person, I'd go for 90 minutes on this free consultation. But in almost every scenario, I had pretty much answered every question they had, and they no longer had a need to hire me. And I suffered from that over and over and over again.
So you have to discipline yourself to, okay, it's at the 30-minute mark, we've got to cut it off.
There was no way I was going to do that. I suffered through, honestly. I suffered through. My thing is I just served people. And by the way, I made $11,000. I want to say this. I did make some money in 2008. The business did. And so the business was responsible for paying for, all the overhead of paying for my CPA. The business paid for my family of 5 to health insurance. That's not cheap. The business did pay for all the overhead of hosting and all that other stuff. But when it came, so I was making money in 2008, but I wasn't making a lot. What happened, though, is that I just consistently served people. And I did one thing that really helped me. I took the most common questions people had, and I put that in my free podcast, and I said, this is a question that somebody just recently paid me to answer for them. And here's the question, and here's what I told them. And I gave them what somebody else just paid me for. And then other people who say, I can't afford to hire you. And I said, okay, well, if you can't afford to hire me, then what's your question? And I won't answer you in an email, but I will answer it in my podcast for free. And what happened was eventually people started writing me emails saying, Cliff, I found you a couple weeks ago as a result of a Google search. I've listened to 2 or 3 of your podcast episodes. I want to hire you. How much is it, and when can I get on your schedule? That's a whole lot different than can I get a free 30-minute consultation. Yeah. Now today, I'm at a place where if you say, hey, Cliff, I found you as a result of a Google search, or a friend referred me, can I get a free consultation to see if maybe I want to work with you? I say, listen, here's what you do. Go over to learnhowtopodcast.com, and that's a free tutorial. Watch that. It doesn't cost you anything. There's no strings attached. Then listen to the most recent 1 or 2 episodes of my podcast, Answer Man Podcast. After doing those things, if you are not completely convinced I'm the person to work with, you should not hire me. And every one of them end up buying from me.
So you in a sense, put all the value out first, and then
you deliver value first, and the money follows.
Now, my podcast is the Empowered Podcast, and I mentioned earlier, I blog at empowering80%.com. And so my focus is on empowering people. What does the word empower mean to you?
Empower means to give people the tools necessary to fulfill their purpose and mission in life. And it's my desire to, that's what it means to serve somebody. So when somebody has a question or has a goal, for example, in my world, somebody has a goal to create a podcast so they can get their mission out, their message out to the world, then all of a sudden, if the only thing that's stopping them is the fact that they don't know how to create a podcast, I can empower them to achieve their goal of putting their message into the world by teaching them how to do a podcast.
And what does a typical day look like for Cliff Ravenscraft?
Whatever I want it to look like. Absolutely. I can wake up at 5 a.m., spend 2.5 hours, 3 hours answering my emails, getting to inbox zero, then going out for a 5-mile walk while I'm thinking about what I want to do for the rest of the day, and I can work on 1, 2, or 3 projects and go out for 2-hour lunch with my wife if I want to. I can start working, stop working whenever I want. I am in control of my own day. Or I can stay up late watch TV, catch up on what's on the DVR, and I can sleep until 11 a.m. the next morning if I want. Every day I choose my life.
What are you watching on your DVR right now? What's recording at home?
Person of Interest. I love that television show. I love... I'm enjoying The Blacklist right now with James Spader. And now, I'm not overly crazy about the new Tomorrow People that is on the No, it might be the CW.
Okay.
But the Tomorrow People. Now, I'm a geek, and in 1978, there was a British sci-fi television series called The Tomorrow People.
Okay.
And in 1981 to 1984, they aired it on television on Nickelodeon. And as a kid, I loved that, and so I'm watching that too.
Okay. What was the last movie that you saw?
Gravity with Sandra Bullock and that other guy that everybody thinks is George Clooney. Yeah, and I loved it.
It's pretty intense.
I loved it. For me, I enjoyed it for a completely different reason. I used to listen to this audio drama series from Ray Bradbury's Ray Bradbury 13 is all science fiction stuff, and it reminds me of a audio drama about a space. It's a futuristic time where these astronauts were out in space, and their ship had been hit by asteroids, and they all got dispersed into space, and it was them communicating to each other, and it just made me relive something that was... I remember hearing that when I was probably 17, 18 years old, so for me it had a little bit of a nostalgic feeling.
Very cool. If you could give one piece of advice to people who, like me, or the audience, to the people that are just starting out, what's one piece of advice that you could give them? Serve
people. Go out of your way and find ways to help people succeed. The quickest way to find success in life is by helping other people find success. And the other thing I will say is, don't chase the money, chase something you love. One of my favorite quotes from that kept me going in the early days is, find something that you love to do so much that you'd be willing to do it all day long for free. And then become so excellent at doing that one thing that people would be willing to pay you to do it.
Awesome. Well, thank you for your time. I know we're about to head to lunch. What's your favorite social media place where people can find you?
Well, if you want to follow me on Twitter, that'd be great. Twitter.com/GSPN. It stands for Generally Speaking Production Network. It is my brand name. It's just because Ravenscraft, they won't let you put the T on there. I think it's only 10 letters, and I've got 11 letters in the last name. So GSPN is where I'm at on Twitter.
Twitter's your platform of choice?
Actually, I engage more on Facebook, but that's where, if you just want to follow me and see what's going on,
cool.
Twitter's the easiest way to do that.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time.
Awesome. Thank you.
And I want to send a special thank you out to Cliff. You know, again, all of my guests, they don't have to spend any time with me, but Cliff had just come out of doing a talk. And if you're at all interested in podcasting, or if you have a podcast yourself, or even if you're not interested in creating a podcast yourself, your life, whether you know it or not, has been touched by Cliff Ravenscraft. So many people who are respected in whatever industry that you're in, who start public speaking or whatever it is, have inevitably come across Cliff and the message that he teaches. And he is really such a down-to-earth guy, and I've got to know him just a little bit over the last couple months, and it's been an absolute pleasure. If this is the type of interview that you like, would you send Cliff a thank you tweet for me? As he mentioned, he's on Twitter at GSPN, which stands for the Generally Speaking Podcasting Network or Production Network, one of the two. Either way, it's GSPN, and just tell Cliff that you appreciate him taking his time to be on the show and that you enjoyed it. Would you do me a favor now? Would you head over to empoweringthe80%.com/EP12 as Empowered Podcast 12 and let me know what you think of the show in the comments section. And it's that time again. Time for a rating and review in iTunes. If you'll go over to that same page, empoweringthe80%.com/EP12. You'll see a link to iTunes and Stitcher and my new and noteworthy time period, which is kind of your honeymoon period for starting a podcast, ends in the middle of January. It's actually the second week of January 2014, and I would really appreciate any feedback that you have for me, for the show, the format, the music, the guests, any of that. If you will leave me a comment either at EP12, empoweringthe80%.com/EP12, or by going to iTunes and leaving me a rating and review. And I would really appreciate it. Now, here's a taste of what's coming up on the next episode.
Hey, if you work hard at something, great things will happen. You just have to be patient and work smart. I want to lead by example. If you go to my Twitter handle, there's 3 things I say. Lead by example, be honest, and hold nothing back.